And the Republican presidential field is set to widen this week as President Obama's former ambassador to China, Jon Huntsman, formally enters the race this week. But the spotlight is also on another potential GOP candidate. And CBS News political correspondent Jen Crawford is in Washington with more on that. Jan, good morning to you.
Well, good morning, Jeff. You know, as you said, Huntsman will be the newest candidate as of tomorrow. But at the Republican leadership conference over the weekend, it was Texas Governor Rick Perry who stole the show.
Let's stop this American downward spiral.
He hasn't said whether he's running, but Perry sure sounded like a presidential candidate at the annual gathering of conservative Republicans.
I stand before you today a disciplined conservative Texan, a committed Republican, and a proud American, united with you in the desire to restore our nation and revive the American dream.
It's no secret Perry is thinking about it. His staff already is laying the groundwork for primaries in key states like Iowa. At the conference, Perry said conservatives need to stick to their principles, a hint about how he would approach his campaign.
Our party cannot be all things to all people. It can't be. And our loudest opponents on the left are never going to like us, so let's quit trying to curry favor with them.
Former Utah Governor Jon Huntsman was not at the conference, even though he plans to announce his candidacy tomorrow. But the Obama administration already is trying to undercut him with conservatives. On CNN this weekend, the president's chief political strategist described a 2009 meeting between President Obama and Huntsman, who until recently was his ambassador to China.
He was encouraging on health care. He was encouraging on the whole range of issues. He was a little quizzical about what was going on in his own party. And you got the strong sense that he was going to wait until 2016 for the storm to blow over. Obviously, circumstances changed.
Now, the question for Huntsman is whether he can distance himself from all that, put that behind him, and whether voters will believe him. Jeff?
Jan, let's go back to Rick Perry, if we could, for a second here. In your opinion, at this point, how serious is he about running, and can he win?
Oh, he's serious, but I think that at this point, we saw one of his top advisors say over the weekend that it was 50-50. That's a lot further than he was in the past. Can he win? People have been looking at this Republican field saying this is kind of this lackluster bunch. We need someone else to run, so that's why you're seeing a lot of excitement for Rick Perry.
Jan, hang with us for a second if you could now. Maybe we can bring in Ron Fournier now. Ron, let's continue this talk about Rick Perry because he obviously is the talk right now. I saw an interesting tweet, actually, from Mike Murphy over the weekend. He said Rick Perry formidable in the GOP primary, general election gift to Obama. Are things easier for Perry in the primaries than they would be in the race after?
Oh, definitely. He is, as he says, a disciplined conservative from Texas. He would be a formidable candidate in the primary race, but in the general election, he could be too far to the right for a lot of voters. He's kind of the anti-Huntsman. Huntsman's going to have a really hard time, if not impossible, winning the nomination, but then he'd be a pretty tough candidate in the general election because he's a little bit more towards the middle, a little closer to Obama on the political spectrum, which is why you have Axelrod, throwing these love notes to Huntsman. He would love to be able to make it hard for Huntsman to come out of the primaries.
Yeah, Jen, the White House is really trying to cozy up the president to Huntsman. Obviously, they did work together. Is that going to be an effective strategy? Can Huntsman properly separate himself from his old boss?
Well, I mean, that is the question for Jon Huntsman, although, of course, you also need to look at his record when he was governor of Utah. He was pretty moderate as a governor then. So, he's got this loyalist kind of demeanor with President Obama. They're trying to obviously emphasize that. And then you got to look at his record. I think it's going to be very tough for Jon Huntsman to actually define who he is. And if he tries to go too far to the right and beat up on Barack Obama, is he going to look disloyal, and will voters believe it? Is he going to seem real if he starts running as some kind of far-right conservative? We saw what happened when Mitt Romney tried to do that in 2008. No one bought it. People did not think he was being authentic, and it really hurt him back in 2008.
Yeah, I mean, and Ron, I mean, is that the question at this point? Has this really come together? Are they staking out their positions to what we're going to see in the election here? It's Huntsman who's closer to the center, and it's Rick Perry who just, at this point, does not seem interested in being inclusive.
Where we are, we're in that point of the campaign. It happens every cycle. When the party out of power is dissatisfied with their field, because it's hard to see anybody this early on standing up to the President of the United States. So there's always somebody better. There's always a greener side of the fence. 4 years ago, if you remember, it was Fred Thompson. who was going to be the great savior of the Republican Party, and he lasted about 2.5 weeks. I'm not saying that's going to happen to Perry, but right now, the party is struggling to find somebody who can take on a pretty formidable candidate.
Ron, let me make a follow-up on that too, Ron. I mean, one of the things I think that we're seeing that's really interesting now, and we saw Axelrod over the weekend talking about whether or not, Huntsman was really this best friend of Barack Obama. This White House is already right out of the gate almost playing whack-a-mole. Yep. Whenever you see a potential primary contender on the Republican Party start to get some momentum, the White House comes right out and starts bashing them down. Have you noticed that?
No,
Does that seem different?
It's a very good observation. You almost don't have to look at the polls. All you got to do is listen to David Axelrod and Robert Gibbs, and you can tell who's leading in the Republican primary.
Yeah.
They don't want anybody to be coming out of the gate strong.
So we'll see if they start hitting up on Michelle Bachmann, whether or not they're starting to take her seriously.
Palin.
Someone who got a lot of momentum over the weekend at another conference in Minnesota with some conservative activists. She really brought down the House. So after that debate performance last week, she's starting to really pick up steam, I think.
Yeah, she could win in Iowa. The thing to watch this week, this is the last week where they can raise money. The candidates can raise money for this quarter. And it'll be really interesting to see who comes out of this quarter with the most money. It's really the big tell. So let's watch that at the end of the week.
Yeah, and how Newt Gingrich does, if any of those donors stick with him, too.
Exactly.
All right. Anyway, Jeff, obviously there's a lot to talk about here in politics, so a lot going on this week.
A discussion that will continue for quite some time. Jan Crawford and Ron Fournier, we appreciate both of your time this morning. Thank you from Washington.
Thank you.